What I want to talk about now are the pages of content on your website. Now, it's worth you understanding that these pages of content are known as K2 items on the website. That's their terminology on the actual website itself. That's what they're called inside your website content management system. So it's K2 items are the pages of content on your website. Now, what do I mean when I say pages of content on your website? Well, what I'm referring to here are the actual pages of information themselves. So these pages of text and image and link content, these pages are called K2 items in the system. So it's K2 items as in the letter K, the number 2, and then items, K2 items. So I think of K2 items as being a little bit like Word documents work on a computer. So on your computer you have the Word document, and inside that Word document you have the text and you have the images and you have the content. Well, on the website you have the K2 items. They're essentially the online website equivalent of Word documents. And therefore it's into those K2 items you'll need to go should you want to change the content on any page. Now, you can get to your K2 items quite easily by doing the following. The first thing you need to do is start off by clicking onto the Components tab just here. So you have all of the main tabs that run along the top of the administrator side of the website. If you go ahead and open up the Components tab just by clicking on it, you'll see that it opens up a few options. Now that list may be larger or shorter for you. It depends on what type of website your site is. But to get to the point, about a quarter of the way down the list for me, you see we have the option of K2. So what you need to do is go onto the Components tab first and then hover over the option called K2, and that'll open up a new set of options which are essentially the sub areas, the subsections of this K2 component. Now it's worth understanding that the component that handles all of these K2 items and all of these K2 categories is obviously called K2. Now, as I mentioned a second ago, we have K2 items, which are the actual pages of content themselves, and we have the K2 categories. Now, K2 categories are literally what hold these items. They're a bit like folders, okay? And every single K2 item must be in a category, okay? You can't have items that are not in a category. In other words, they must be sorted up into some form of category. Now, the category that the item goes into is basically what determines how and where that K2 item is going to render and appear on the front end of the site. So the K2 category does have a lot to say when it comes to really deciding how these items show on the website, and it is very important that all of your K2 items are in the right category, because if it's not in the right category, it might either simply not show on the right page, or it might not show properly. The template or the layout of that K2 item might not work properly because all of that information, all of that template and layout information is retrieved from the category that the item is in. So don't worry, I'll show that in more detail in just a moment. I just wanted to explain to you that K2 items are divided up into categories, like pieces of paper are divided up into folders. Now, when you hover over K2 here, what you can see is obviously plenty of options. Now, we're not going to be using all of these options down here. We're going to be leaving those alone, but we are going to be going into items and categories at some point as well later on. Now, as I say, if you were to go straight into items, that will take you into a big list of all of the K2 items on your website, all of these pages of content. And if you do want to edit your pages of content, then that's where you need to go, K2 items. So if you want to edit the About Us page, then you need to go in there and find and open the K2 item called About Us. If you want to change the content on your terms and conditions, it's exactly the same idea. Okay, but if you want to customize the categories, then you will obviously need to be going into categories there. Now, I'll explain that later on, because there's a few things you want to be careful with when it comes to the categories. Basically, because these categories contain a lot of settings, and configuration, we do need to be a little bit careful with what we change, but I'll cover that later on in the training session. So what we're going to look at first are going to be the items. So hover over components, then hover over K2, and then click on items. So when I hover over components, then go K2, and finally click on items, what that does is it takes me to a list of literally every single K2 item that is currently on this website. So you know that you're in the right place because it literally says K2 items up on the top left hand side here. So if you see that it says K2 items here, it means you're on the list of K2 items on your website and therefore have access to any of the pages on your website. So, remember that pathway, remember the process of having to go components, K2, items, because you'll need to do that a lot, because one of the main things you're going to spend most of your time doing on the website will be, of course, changing these pages of content, and the only way you can change these pages of content is by accessing the relevant K2 items, and they're of course found inside this section here. Okay, so you're looking at a list of every single K2 item on the website right now. You can see if I scroll down this list and go right down to the bottom, you can see at the bottom, right here, it goes on to page 2. So at the bottom of the list, it should show you if the items are staying on one page or if they're spread over a series of different pages. Now, because these items are going on to page 2, that simply means that there are so many of them, it reckons that it should sort them up onto multiple pages. Now, that's fine if that's the way you like to organize things, but personally, I don't really like that. I prefer myself to have all of the K2 items in one big list. It just makes it easier to navigate through them and to find the relevant ones rather than having to jump between, a series of different pages. Now, it's very easy to get them all on one list. All you need to do is set this number option here. You can see it says 20, and that simply means that it's only going to show 20 K2 items before then going on to page 2. Okay, so if I look at this list here, basically, if you were to count that number, there would be 20 of them, okay? And then it's going on to page 2. Well, if you just change that 20 option to the highest option in the list, which is, of course, all, it's simply going to quickly reload the page, reload the list of K2 items, and show all of them, rather than going on to multiple pages. Okay, so there we are. We can see them all on one list, no page 1, no page 2. Fantastic. So there we are, we have all of our K2 items running down the page, and they're literally all in the same location. Now you can see that the items are divided up with some columns. So you can see the columns that go along left to right basically divide the items up into their different settings. Now, this column, for example, you can see is called the title column. Obviously that's a very important column because the title is literally the name of the page itself, the title of the K2 item. Obviously a very important element, and it is on the title under this column that you will need to click should you want to go into any one of these K2 items and start changing the content. Okay, so you click on the title and that takes you into the K2 item itself. Now, the next most important column, in my opinion, is going to be this one here, the category column. Okay, now this is such an important column because the category is, as I said a moment ago, literally almost like the folder that each item is assigned to, the folder that each item is in. Now, the categories are very important because they, as I say, determine and decide how and where each K2 item will show on the front end of the website. So I'll go through these and explain them in a little detail in just a moment, but basically if we just take the first set as an example here we can see we have some K2 items all within the category of testimonials. You can see all of these here. Okay, and that basically means that on the website, on the front end of the website, the side the public see, we will have a testimonials page, and basically any K2 items that have been put into that category will show on that page. Okay, that's something that the web developer has set up for you. They have configured that particular testimonials page to simply display any K2 item that has been placed into the category of testimonial. Okay, now how they display on the page, so things like the ordering that they display in, and how many show on the page before going on to the next page too, how that's set up is all configured within the category settings. So I'll take you through the category settings later on, but if you're ever wondering how the K2 items are ordered on that page, or how they are laid out, well, that's all configured in the category settings. And that's why I said earlier that the category has a lot to say when it comes to determining how each item shows on the actual website itself. So as I say, we have a load of columns that go along from left to right, and they basically just divide the items up into their different elements. Now, you are able to sort all of the K2 items in this list by any one of these columns. So, for example, you can see along the top of each column it tells you obviously the title of that column, and you can sort it by any one. For example, you'll notice if I just hover over the word title here, it pops up and it says click to sort by this column. So if I were to do that, it would sort them alphabetically by their title. Okay, now that's okay. I don't tend to usually do that. I don't tend to usually sort them by their title column because I'm not really interested in their alphabetical order. But before I show you which column I do sort them by, which column is it currently sorting them by? Well, it's currently sorting them by the ID column, this one right here. Now, how do we know that it's sorting by the ID column? Well, I know that because the system has placed a little black arrow icon, a little inverted triangle, next to the word ID, and it's that icon which tells you which column it's sorting by. Okay, so simply because it's got a black arrow next to that ID word, it means it's sorting them by their ID number, and as you can see, it's going obviously ascending, so backwards in numerical value based on their ID. Now, it's not really worth sorting by the ID column. Now, what is the ID number? Well, the ID number is just a number that is automatically generated by the system when the K2 item is made. So whenever you make a new K2 item, a new testimonial or a new team member or a new blog post, the system just allocates an automatic number to that item. It's not a number that you're ever going to need to use. It's not a number you'll need to pay attention to. It's really just, a number that the system uses. So sorting by the ID column is pretty pointless in my opinion. So I'm not going to sort by that column, even though it is the column that it's sorting by automatically. Which column should we sort the items by? Well, the best column to sort them by is certainly going to be the category column. Okay, so remember that the category is almost like the folder that each item is in, so we might as well bunch them all up into their different categories. We might as well have them all sorted up into the different folders that they are in. So as you can see, it's very easy to do that. It's very easy to sort them by that column. It's just a case of clicking on the word category. Again, you can see when I hover over, it says click to sort by this column, and that's what I want. So I recommend that you do that as well. So if I go ahead and click on the word category, you can see that it's now ordered all of the items on the page by that category column. You can see that the system has placed that little black triangle icon next to the word category, which is what indicates to us that it is indeed sorting by that column, and they are now all bunched up down the page, down this entire list, based on the category that they are in. So it makes it much easier to manage, because say you come to this list of K2 items maybe someday in the future, and you just want to manage, say, the items on the testimonials page. All you need to do now is come to the list of K2 items, which, remember, sorry to keep going over it, but which, remember, you get to by going components K2 items. I just really want to nail that path, path in, because you will need to be doing that quite a lot. So as I say, if you want to manage all of the items in the category of testimonials, you get to this list of K2 items. All you need to do is once you're sorting by the category column, scroll down the list until you find all of those items in that category. And because they're all bunched up next to each other, it does make it a lot easier to manage them. Okay, so once you're sorting by the category column, you can see them all running down the page. Now in this example, let me just explain, briefly how I like to visualize it. So once I'm sorting by that column, this is how I look at them. You can see that here we have all of the items inside the category of marriage blogs. So on the website, on the front end of the website, there will be a page that is simply set up to display any items that have been put into that category of marriage blogs. Okay, same idea for this this category of Meet the Team. You can see here we have all the items within that category. Now, Meet the Team is obviously a page on your site where it's showing all of the team members, and basically it's the same case that all this is doing is showing any items within that category. Here we have some more items in this other category of blog. So there'll be a category of there'll be a page called Our Blog, and that's all of the items on that page. Now here you can see we have some items in the category of pages. Now what is the category of pages? Well, this category is basically one that is reserved for your real simple standard standalone pages of content. So basically the bog standard simple pages of information are all going to be in the category of pages, and that's why in here we can see we have the likes of the About Us page, the Why Choose Us, the FAQs page, because these are all real simple pages of information. They're therefore in the category of pages. So I do strongly recommend going through and looking at whatever items you have in that category of pages and just really getting to grips with what you're dealing with and what items you have in that category. Okay. So if I just scroll down the page a little further just to finish it off, again here we have some items in the category, in this case of relationship blogs. So those are those blog entries that are going to show on that page, the relationships blog page. And here we have the final set of items inside the category of testimonials. Again, those are the items that show on the testimonials page. So I do strongly recommend that once you get to your items, sort by the category column, and it makes it a lot easier to manage as you go down the list of K2 items. So once you've got to grips with the fact that all of the K2 items are divided up into these different categories, it's time to start having a look at some of them and to start populating them with your own content. Now, before I show you how to do this, let me just explain some of the basic options that you have. You can see along the top here, along the top of the K2 items, we have these buttons. Now these are essentially the basic general options you always have when you're looking at this list of K2 items. Now let me just go through them quickly. Now the first option you see here is called Toggle Featured State. Now what does that mean? Well, basically some items are going to be featured and some won't be. Now 9 times out of 10 most websites only ever have one featured article, and for good reason. Why is that? Well, the featured K2 item or the featured article is simply going to be the page or the K2 item that shows on the very home page of your website. So when someone goes to your website and they open up the first screen, the home page, they may see some content on there. Usually this is the welcome text, welcome to our website, yada yada yada. Okay, that article that you're looking at there is the featured article. So whichever K2 item is set as featured will be the one that shows on the home page of your site. Now why would you only ever want to really have one? Well, simply because you're not going to want to have lots of articles on the home page. The graphic designer who built your website, or who designed your website rather, has very carefully decided and designed the layout of your site, and he will have done that with it in mind that you're only going to have one page of content or section of information on the home page, and that's why you only ever want to have one K2 item as featured. Now if you look closely, you can see in this list of items there is a column here called featured, and that tells you whether the item is featured or not. And as you can see, pretty much all of them are not featured, and that's indicated with those little red crosses. However, one of them is. You can see if I scroll down, you can see that it's one of the items which is in the category of pages right here, and you can see it's called Welcome. It's the K2 item that goes by the name of Welcome. You can see that underneath the featured column here it has a green tick, and that is the item, that is the page of content that shows on the home page of your website. So if you do want to change that text, all you really need to do is scroll down this list, find whichever one has a green tick under that featured column, and go into it and change your content. Now, depending on the design of your website, you may or may not have any set as featured, okay? So if you go down this list and you can't find any K2 items that are featured, then there is no welcome text on the home page of your website. It may be a module. I will explain modules later on, don't worry, but basically what I'm trying to say here is if you don't have a K2 item that is set to featured, in other words, you don't have a K2 item that is showing on the home page of your site, if you and you do have some welcome text, well, that text may be stored inside a module. But don't worry, I'll explain modules later. But on this website, in this example, we do have a K2 item that is featured, and it's the welcome text right there. Okay, I do not recommend ticking any of the other pages as featured, because if you do that, that will go straight onto the home page, and it might not look any good because the designer has not designed the template of the website with it in mind to have more than one on the home page. So it is a good idea just to leave it as one K2 item. You can do that, as I say, either by clicking on the green tick or the actual cross like that. That's my preferred way of doing it, or the longer way is by ticking the box in front of the K2 item itself. So you're almost like saying, this is the item I'm focusing on right now, by ticking the box, and then you can go toggle featured state. And because that one is currently set to featured, if I click that box and then go toggle featured state, it'll just change it to the other option, which is of course unfeatured, which I'm not going to want. Okay, but my preferred method is just by clicking on the actual green tick itself, and that'll then remove it as a featured item, or of course click on the red cross to put it as a featured item. The next option here is called publish. Now this is only used if the item is unpublished. So published status, the published status of the items, is basically where we decide whether the K2 item itself is turned on or off. Okay, so if it's published, it's turned on. If it's unpublished, it's turned off. Okay, of course you can see the unpublish option here. Okay, now again, you can unpublish or republish something just by ticking the box in front of the name of the K2 item you want to change, and then choosing the relevant option. But again, for these, you can see we do have a published column here, which is very similar to the featured column in the sense that you can use that to change the status instead of having to use these buttons here. I prefer just to use the column. So say for example you wanted to turn off, here we can see we have some of the items inside of marriage blogs. Say I wanted to turn off blog post 2 for whatever reason, I could do that just by clicking on the green tick under the published column, and that would unpublish that blog post. Okay, so it would no longer appear on the website. So as far as the website user is concerned, that K2 item is turned off completely. It won't show on the website at all. But the good thing about unpublishing things rather than deleting them is that if you ever want it back again, you can always just republish it. So let me just show you by just unpublishing blog post 2 by clicking on that green tick. I click on that now, you can see it's briefly reloading the page. Once it reloads, it should show a little red cross under that column. And there you go, you can now see that it shows a red cross, which means that item is unpublished and will no longer display on the front end of the website. Now that's fine to do. It's absolutely fine to unpublish K2 items if, and only if, they are within a category that is being displayed on the front end of the website so that it's showing all of the items. Now let me explain that. Do a better job of explaining that. For example, here we have some items in the category of marriage blog. Now that means that somewhere on the front end of the website there will be a page for marriage blogs, and that page is set up to simply display any K2 items that have been put into that category. So unpublishing those K2 items within that category is fine, because all that page is doing is showing everything inside that category. So if we turn that item off, it simply will not stop showing that item, because As far as the system is concerned, that item is no longer in that category, simply being unpublished. But what can't you unpublish? What items in this list shouldn't you unpublish? Well, basically, you shouldn't unpublish K2 items if there are menu items or links going directly to the item itself. So menu items are those links inside the big menus that you have on the website. So for example, on your website you might have a menu that goes along the top of the site, say the main menu for example. It's the big navigation tool that the user uses to get to the pages. Well, in that menu we have menu items. Now those menu items are just the links. So for example, inside a typical main menu we might have the menu items home, about us, blog, contact us, and so on. Now those menu items simply link through to either the K2 category, and therefore shows all of the items inside. So for example, the menu item of blog will typically link through to the blog category, and therefore show all of the K2 items inside that category. However, a typical About Us menu item won't link through to a category, it will instead link through directly to the K2 item itself, About Us. Okay? Because with About Us pages, it's just wanting to show the content, all of the content on that page. It's not showing multiple entries or multiple posts, you know. The About Us page is just a simple standalone page of content. So the menu item, the link that goes to that page, is going directly to that K2 item, rather than going to a category that that item is in. So it's for that reason we wouldn't want to unpublish the K2 item About Us, because if we unpublish that item, that menu item is still trying to link to it. But if you turn the item off, the menu item can't go anywhere, and what it will do is it will end up in an error 404 page not found message. So if you ever see an error 404 page not found message on your website, the chances are that is because the element that was trying to link to that page is linking to something that's either been deleted or turned off. Okay, so if I was to unpublish the About Us page, the menu item that's trying to link to that page has nothing to go to. We've turned off what it was trying to go to, and that's what an error 404 page not found message is. It's basically when you're trying to get to a page that has either been turned off, moved, or deleted. Generally speaking, you're not ever going to want to unpublish K2 items within the category of pages. This is because, remember I said that pages, category of pages, are items that are basically simple, standalone pages of content. And these items generally tend to have menu items linking directly to them. Okay, so the link that goes to the, the FAQs page is going directly to that K2 item, okay? And therefore, you wouldn't want to unpublish FAQs. So my recommendation is to avoid unpublishing or deleting any K2 items within the category of pages. Generally speaking, everything else you should be okay and free to unpublish, again because those elements are categories. So, again, here we have all of the items within the category of Meet the Team, and basically the Meet the Team on this website, the Meet the Team page on this website, is simply linking to that category as a whole, and therefore showing the items inside. So it's fine to unpublish those items or delete them, because they will just simply stop showing on that page. It's not linking directly to them. I'm sorry if I've explained that in too much detail, but it is very important. It is critical that we try and avoid getting 404 pages on our site, because that's not going to do us any good in terms of Google search engine optimization, and it doesn't look any good on the site itself either. Now, of course, I've shown you how to unpublish an item with the published column. You can also do that with the options that we see at the top here. But what if you want to delete an item? What if you are absolutely certain you do not want a K2 item on your website and you just want to get rid of it, you want to delete it? Well, that's quite simple. All you need to do is tick the box in front of the name of the item here. So for example, if I delete team member 8, you just tick the box in front of the one that you want to delete, and then you can see here you have the option of trash. Okay, and that will totally delete and remove that K2 item from the website. But again, bear in mind that that is a permanent change, and if you want it back again, you'll have to retrieve it from the recycle bin. Okay, now let me show you. So if I go ahead and delete team member 8 right now, if I just tick the box in front of the name and then just hit trash, that's going to delete that item, and it's no longer in the list. You can see it pops over a notice here that says items moved to trash. Now you can see that if I look here, we have all of the items in that category, and team member 8 is no longer there. What if you've decided you've made a terrible decision and you actually do want that item on your website? Well, you do have a recycle bin, believe it or not, with the K2 items on your site, and it is accessed by first going to this option here. You can see that it currently says current. Now, basically that's a filter, and that means that it's showing us all of the current items, all of the items that are currently actually working on the website. But if I change that drop down, you can see we have the option of trashed here. If I click on trashed, it's now simply going to show me all of the items that have been deleted, and this is basically your recycle bin. If I look closely here, I can see that we have team member 8, and if I did want to restore that K2 item, I can just tick the box in front of it just to say this is the one I want to restore. You can do multiple as well if you want to though, and then you can just go ahead and click on the restore button up on the top left hand side here. If I click on that now, it will restore that K2 item. It's now moved from this list because it's no longer a trashed item. If I click on this drop down option again and go to current once more, it's now going to show me all of the present published current K2 items on the website, and you can see there it is again. So I have restored that item, but generally speaking I say if in doubt, unpublish rather than deleting, because unpublishing is basically as good as deleting. It just means that you can bring it back even easier rather than having to retrieve it from the recycle bin. What I'd like to do now, though, is show you how to populate a K2 item with content. So I'm going to get to it now and show you how to fill in any of these pages in this list or any of the K2 items on your website with your own content. And this content can be text, it can be images, it can be links, okay? So, of course, in order to show you how to populate one of these K2 items with content, I'm going to have to go into one of them as an example, and then show you how it's done in that one. But do understand that what I'm about to teach you in terms of content population or K2 item content population, it's the same process for all of the items in this list here, you see, okay? So, what page shall I work on, just to show you some of the basics? Well, I'm already in the list of items, which remember we get to by going component K2 items here. If I scroll down this list though, now because the items in the category of pages are our real simple pages of information, I think that's going to be a good example. One of those items will be a good example for us to work on first. Now, any one is as good as the other, so I'm just going to go into the About K2 item. So basically, I'm going to show you how to edit the page on the About Us page for your website. But again, what I'm about to show you, it's the same for any that you see in this list. The rules are the same. So I can open up the K2 item by clicking on the title just like that, and as you can see it takes us to this page, which is of course the About Us page here. You can see it's called About Us, and we have the content editor down here, and we have some basic settings that we see on the right hand side here as well. Let me explain those basic settings later on. For now I just want to explain the basics, which is going to be this area here, which is really the main area you're going to be focusing on when it comes to the K2 item. All of these settings that you have running down the screen on the right hand side here are just the finer tuned settings and configuration of the item itself, but they can be left alone, and in fact most of the time I think you'll find yourself leaving those alone, but we can go into those if we want to get into the more of the advanced settings for the K2 item later on. Now, of course, we have the text editor down here, but before I explain this text editor, let me just run through these basic options that we have at the top here. Now, these are the very basic options, the very basic configuration of the K2 item itself, and it is worth just going through this quickly every time you come into a K2 item, just to make sure they are set up to what they need to be, because they can, ruin or break how the K2 item shows on the front end of the website if they're not filled in properly. So it is worth certainly looking at them. So in this example, of course, this is the About Us page. So the first option we have here is the title, and the title is About Us. Now that is obviously the name of the page, the title of the K2 item. Now there are no limitations on what that title can be. So in other words, you are more than welcome to change the title of any K2 item on your website. It's absolutely fine, and it can be whatever you want. However, there is one golden rule that you absolutely must stick to when it comes to the title of all K2 items on your website. And this rule is that it must be unique. Okay, it absolutely must be unique per K2 item. In other words, you cannot and should not ever have 2 or more K2 items on your site with the same title. Now let me explain why that is. So you can see below the title here we have the title alias URL. Okay, the title alias URL. Now that is basically the page address, the page URL. Now what is the URL for a page? Well, this element that you see at the top of the screen here is the URL, and every single page on every single website has one. So let me explain this by going on to Amazon's website, amazon.co.uk. So, of course, I'm on Amazon. Every single page, every single product, every single category has a URL, and this is obviously this element that I just explained here. It's the address, it's the page-specific address. So you can see if I go into the category of books and then go into Kindle books, for example, you can see that the URL changes. So the URL for this entire page is right there. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of our website? Well, as I said, the URL needs to be specific to the page. Okay, so if I go back onto the site, you can see here that we have the title alias URL. Now that will generate the URL for this page. Okay, so whatever your website address is, it'll go your website address.com or .co.uk/ and then that About Us. Now, the reason we need to make sure that the title is unique, and the reason we need to make sure that no 2 K2 items have the same title, is because the URL, the title URL, generates automatically from the title. So whatever the title is, that's what the URL will become. And you can therefore understand that this means if we were to have 2 or more pages with the same title, that's then going to mean that we're going to have 2 or more pages with the same URL, the same address, and that's a problem. That's a bit like having 2 houses with the same address. It's going to cause problems, and what will actually happen will the website will start returning error 404 page not found messages, because what it tries to do is it tries to go to the address, it sees that 2 pages or more have that same address, and it won't return any of them because it doesn't know for sure which one it should be returning. But that can all be avoided just by making sure that you're enforcing the rule of keeping each title for each K2 item unique. Now, what if I wanted to change that title? What if I wanted to change it from, say, from About Us just to About our website? Okay, that's fine. There's no problem with that as a title. It's unique. There aren't any other K2 items with that as a title, so that's absolutely spot on. However, because we've changed the title, you can see that the title alias URL is no longer in sync with that title, and we need it to be. The URL should always represent the title of the page. Now, the title alias URL will automatically regenerate if it's empty, if it's deleted. So the rule is, if you do decide to ever change the title of any K2 item on your website, make sure that you delete the title alias URL just like that, just like I've done so there, okay? So that when you then press either save or save and close up on the top left hand side here, it will regenerate based on your brand new title, which I'm actually going to do now. So I've changed the title from About Us to About Our Website, and I've also made sure that the title alias URL is empty and deleted. If I now just go ahead and press save just here, watch what happens right here. Keep your eyes on this when I press save now. That's saving the changes. It's going to reload the actual page itself quickly. Okay, so that seems to have reloaded now, and there we are. We can see that the title alias URL has regenerated based on our new title, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so I know I'm taking a long time to explain this, but it is so important, because if we don't enforce these basic rules from the get-go, it can cause huge problems in the long run of our website, and the last thing we want are duplicated URLs or error 404 pages. So that's why we need to make sure that the title is unique and that the title alias URL is always in sync with the title, and it will be in sync, it will regenerate provided that you delete it. Now if I just change this back to how it was before, so if I change it back to About Us, now because I've changed the title again, I need to delete the title alias URL again, so I just wipe it out completely. And now if I just press save one more time, that's going to save the change, and then reload the page quickly. Okay, and there we are. You can see that it's taken it back to how it was before, which means that the URL will always represent the title, which is a great thing for your users. It makes sense in terms of what the URLs are called, and it's also great for Google, because Google can see that you're being consistent and that the URLs perfectly match the title of the page, and that's going to give you some search engine optimization benefit as well. The next thing we have is the category just here. Now this is vitally important. The K2 item absolutely must be in the right category. That is critical. If it's not in the right category, chances are it will not show on the right page of your website, or it won't show properly, because remember, the category is what determines how the item will show and where it will show. It's also what pulls in things like the template and the layout of the page. So really it's just a case of using common sense, to be honest with you, when it comes to the title. Just make sure it's in the one that makes the most sense for what this K2 item is. Because the About Us page is a fairly bog standard page of information, it's in the category of pages, but you can see if I were to click on that drop down, it does open up all of the other options that we have available on the website. So you can see we have testimonials, blogs, and in this example we have some sub blog options, and then we have Meet the Team, and really it's just a case of choosing the one that makes the most sense, as I say. But how this really works is, if, and I wouldn't, but if I did put the About Us K2 item into the category of testimonials, for example, and then press save or save and close, it would then simply start showing on the testimonials page. It's really as simple as that. But I wouldn't do that because I don't want it to show on the testimonials page. I want it to just be on its own like it is. So I'm going to leave that in the category that it is as pages. But really it's just a case of using common sense and making sure that it's always in the category that, as I say, makes the most sense for what the K2 item is. Next we have the tags option, which we're not going to fill in. Your website will not be using this. Now this is actually commonly mistaken for something to do with search engine optimization, and it is not. This is actually an internal search tool which your website is not using, so you do not need to fill it in at all. If you do fill the tags filled in, you are literally wasting your time. It won't do anything and it won't have any effect on the website whatsoever, so I really wouldn't worry about it. As I say, the tag field is not being used, don't fill it in. Now you can also determine the featured and the published status of the K2 item as well. Remember when we were looking at the big list of K2 items earlier, I explained this. Remember that featured was where you can decide if this K2 item shows on the home page of the website or not, and published was where we decided if it was turned on or off, and I did explain that any K2 items in the category of pages, like this one is, probably shouldn't be unpublished, because remember that there are links going straight to that item, and if you turn it off, the link will have nowhere to go anymore and it won't work. So I generally tend to recommend leaving them how they are, because as you can see they tend to be set up to what they need to be straight away. Featured is no, because we're only going to have one K2 item set as featured, and that'll be the one that already is featured by your developer, and generally speaking it'd be set as yes. However, for the published status, however you can change that if you need to. So that is it. That is it for these basic settings at the top here. Make sure you've gone through those and make sure everything's set up properly. So all in all you really need to do is make sure that the title is what you want it to be, providing that what you want it to be is unique and that there isn't another K2 item on the website with that same title. Make sure that if you do decide to change the title, that you delete whatever is inside that title alias URL box, so that when you press save or save and close, it will regenerate based on your new title, and make sure that it's in the right category, which chances are, if you're coming into a K2 item that already exists on your website, it probably already will be in the right category. But once you've done that, you can scroll down to the actual content area itself down here, and you can see this is a fairly straightforward text editor, and this is where literally all of the content for that page, or all of the content for that K2 item is placed. You can see it's all here. Now, on some pages on your website, I'd imagine you'll find that it's already been filled in with some dummy content, with some dummy text, like this one has here. But in a moment, I will be showing you how to replace all of that text with your own, and also how to insert images and links as well. Now, before I get into the ins and outs of the text editor, and before I really start showing you how to insert your content, I do just want to quickly explain this grey bar that we see in this example page right here. What is that grey bar? What does it do? And why is it there? Well, it's called a read more bar. That's its name. It's called a read more bar. Now, its purpose can be two things. One of two things, or it can be both. Because of its name, it's a read more bar. The first purpose is that it acts as a link. It acts as a read more link. Now, where do we see read more links? Well, basically, we usually see these read more links on news articles, on blog posts, on these types of pages, where the user has the option to click through by clicking on the read more button and be taken through into what I call the full story. So you might have a page that is a category page, say the blog page, and as I explained earlier, that page has been set up to display all K2 items within that category. Well, what it's doing is, whilst it's showing all of those K2 items inside that category, it's not showing all of the content inside them. Okay, it's not showing the entire story. It's just showing you a snippet of information, an introduction, an intro line, or an introduction piece of text. Now, that read more bar is what divides the introduction text from the full story. So you can see in this example here, we're currently on the About Us page. Above that bar, we have what I refer to as the introduction text, okay? And below that bar, we have what I refer to as the full story. Now, because the About Us page is not really a page where the person's going to click on read more, in other words, when they get onto that page, they're just seeing the whole thing, why do we have the read more bar? Well, it also acts as a formatting tool. Now, on this About Us page, the text above that bar will be formatted slightly differently. 9 times out of 10, it will be slightly bigger, a little bit bolder, and it will stand out more. And that's the introduction text. It's an introduction to the actual story itself. And that looks quite nice on the page, because it sort of, it eases the user into the article with a bit of text which stands out a little bit, so it eases the person in. I believe if you look on the BBC News website, they have the same idea. If you go into a news article, any article, you'll see that the first paragraph, usually the opening paragraph, is slightly bolder, slightly bigger, and that's because it's the introduction to the story. It's where the overall summary of the article is sort of summarized, and that's what we can. It's the same purpose on our website. We can use this read more bar to divide the introduction from the full story. Now, on pages like the blog pages and the news pages, it's required, because you wouldn't want to have the full story showing on that page, where all of the other blog posts are showing and where all of the other news stories are showing. You just want a bit of a snippet, a bit of introduction snippet, which the person can then go on to read more if they choose to, okay? And that's what this read more does. It divides the two pieces of text. Now, obviously, we have this read more bar inside this article. We've come into this article and it's already there, so we don't need to worry about inserting it. However, what if you've come into an article that's empty, or what if you've emptied this article out and you want to insert the read more bar yourself? Well, it's quite straightforward. Let me demonstrate by removing it first. If I just click on it, you can see it highlights blue. If I now just press delete, it's now gone from our page of content, and that page will still technically work. It just won't have that formatting change I mentioned a moment ago. So there's no difference between the intro text and the full story. It's all just now one big full story. Now, I can insert that read more bar back again just by clicking at the end of what I want to be introduction text. Now, because I want this to be my intro text, I'm just going to click at the end of it, and then just press enter on my keyboard, and that's now made a brand new blank line into which my read more bar is going to go. So, with my mouse cursor clicked in that middle empty line and flashing, I'm going to go ahead and click on this button here, which you can see is just below the text editor on the left hand side here, called Read More. Okay, so again, make sure that your mouse cursor is on that middle empty line, and then go ahead and choose Read More, and it inserts that bar back in again. And that's what you need. That will now divide the intro text from the full story. And that's literally what it is. It is a physical divide inside the content editor. And the thing above is intro, and the thing below is the full article itself. It's required on any blog articles, any news articles, any Meet the Team pages. It's not necessarily required on pages like About Us. Anyway, basically pages that are in the category of pages. It's not required in those, but it can look nice because it will break the text up into its two different sections, the intro and the full story. So now I'm going to show you how to populate this page with your own content, with your own text and images. Now obviously many of the pages on your website will already be populated with dummy text that we've just inserted just to fill that page out. Of course, feel free to highlight all of that text and then just press delete on your keyboard so that you're just now starting from a blank canvas. Okay, don't worry, I won't go through any of your pages on your site, and I won't delete anything. I'll leave it all to you to change. I'm just explaining that you can, of course, remove it all so that you are starting from nothing. So now what I'm going to show you how to do is how to populate this page of content with your own content. So I'm going to start off by showing you how to properly insert and format your own text content. Then I'm going to show you how to plan, resize and insert your own images into the page as well, and then I'm going to show you how to insert page links also. Okay, now again, even though I'm doing this on the About Us page, on the About Us K2 item, what I'm about to show you in terms of content population is of course exactly the same process for all of the K2 items on your website. So to be honest with you, this section of the website training I'm about to go through in terms of content population is the biggest part of the video, but it is the most important. Basically all I'm going to do is teach you how to use this text editor, and of course we see this text editor in every single K2 item on our website.